Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1096, 1096, Wednesday, April the 8th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, well, as most of you know, it is Wednesday, so on Wednesday, you know what I do. I take out the trash and I have me some chicken every Wednesday. So here in a little while I'll be having some chicken. Haven't decided what type, but it will be chicken. And of course I'll get out the trash. Now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into some of the news of the day. Now, it's been a kind of a slow news day, other than everything's coronavirus all the time right now. And there's, probably plenty of good stories out there about that, but I figure you can get that anywhere and everywhere. So I try to stay as focused as much as possible on the Spygate story. And so while there's not a lot of terribly new information out today, there's a couple articles I want to touch on. I want to revisit a few things I talked about earlier. And I want to give my prognosis for what I think's coming down the road and why I believe that. I also want to give a shout out to my new subscribers. It seems like the past 2 or 3 months I've been getting a lot of new subscribers. So I'm not sure what's driving that, but it's a good thing. So I want to say to all the new subscribers, hello to you. And just so you know, the primary thing that I try to do here is cover the Spygate story. Now, you probably noticed in the last couple months, if you just have come to my channel recently, that I've been talking a lot about politics, the election, other things. But that's only because there's just not very much out there in the Spygate thing. Everything's pretty quiet right now. But believe me, when there is Spygate information out there, that's the very top priority of my YouTube channel, this particular YouTube channel. Also, if you're a new subscriber and you haven't checked out my timeline, you may want to do that, especially if you're one of those people who are laid off and you got a lot of time on your hands, because it takes about 5 to 6 hours to read my timeline from start to finish. I don't recommend you try to do it in one sitting, but maybe like an hour a day you could get it all. And I think it's the best timeline for Spygate on the internet. Of course, it's a clean page. It's just a blog page. There's no ads there. There's no pop-ups. There's nothing. It's just a blog page with nothing but the facts. It is literally the Spygate crime, the Spygate hoax, laid out crime by crime. For the most part, I source it pretty darn well, especially after the first 3 months. The first 3 months, I started the timeline. I kind of had to go back in time because by the time I thought, I want to go ahead and put up a blog page and start keeping track of all these facts, by that point, a lot of the information we had at that point was prior to my putting up the timeline, so I had to kind of go back in time. But once I got caught up to real time, then at that point I was able to put in my sources. So it's sourced very well once you get past the first 3 months on the timeline. So you may want to check that out. Again, I think it's the best timeline of Spygate on the internet. So if you got some time and you want to check it out, the entire Spygate crime is right there. I update it pretty much daily. It is updated right now, so you may want to take a look at that. Also, if you're a new subscriber, I want to, not just for you, but for other people as well, I want to go back and reiterate why I continue to cover the Spygate story, and it's primarily because I believe that there will be consequences for the perpetrators. And I want to give you the reasons why that I believe that. Because if I did not believe that there was going to be arrests, indictments, whatever, charges, I would probably not continue doing the videos. There would be no point in it. The whole point of me doing the Spygate story is to cover the entire Spygate story. And that's not just unraveling everything that happened, but all the way through to the completion, which is to hold the people accountable, meaning put them in prison for the crimes they committed. So I want to give you my thoughts on why I believe that. And I know there's a lot of you out there who don't believe that, and that's fine. And you still watch my channel, and that's great. I know a lot of you are skeptical. You have doubts. You don't think anything will ever happen to these people because, for the most part, people say, well, these guys always get away with it. Well, most of the time they do. But I want to give you the idea, my ideas on why I don't think that'll be the case this time. And does that mean that we're going to get every single one of these guys? Probably not. But I think we're going to get the big fish, and I do believe that Durham is actually going to tell us what happened. Now, we know, for the most part, what happened, but there's a lot of things we don't know, and that's what we're going to learn from Durham. He's going to fill in the blanks, I do believe. And and it's not like people are never held accountable. I mean, if you go back in history, you'll find there have been plenty of high-level people who have been held accountable. Not so much in the intel community, but certainly the FBI, certainly politicians, corrupt people like that. Or if you want to go back to Watergate, remember Watergate, you had the president was forced to resign. The vice president was forced to resign. He was thrown under the bus, and then he was hit with charges for corruption. You had 22 members of the Nixon administration sent to prison, including 2 attorney generals, Kleindienst and John, what's his name? Can't remember the other one, but both attorney generals were sent to jail. So, yeah, I mean, people are held accountable. You just have to have the right prosecutor and the right attorney general and the right president. So I'm going to get into that a little more. But first, let's go ahead and just hit a couple news items, and then I'll jump right into that. So it looks like at the press conference yesterday, Trump talked about the fact that they are looking at putting a hold on funding to the World Health Organization. And absolutely, I have no idea why we're even a part of any of those globalist outfits run primarily out of Brussels with all the Soros people and all the technocrats at the EU and the New World Order globalist crowd. That's all the WHO is. In fact, this idiot, this Tedros guy, I don't know why he's even still there. I mean, this guy botched it so bad that I can't believe he hasn't voluntarily resigned. Obviously, there's many people particularly across Europe, calling for him to resign. He should resign of his own volition, because when you fail as badly as he did, you shouldn't have to wait around for people to ask you to resign. He should step up and say, man, I dropped the ball bad this time. I'm not the guy to be here at this time. And he's not. I don't even know if the guy's even a doctor or a specialist of any kind. I don't know what the hell he is, except for a tool for China. And clearly he was running cover-up for China. That's what he was doing. He should resign, and he should resign in disgrace. And he should possibly even be investigated criminally, because if he was engaged with China and purposely not coming clean about this virus, then he's culpable and liable, legally possibly liable for the cause of many, many deaths, not just here in the United States or in Europe, but around the world. Because a lot of those people from China allowed them to leave. They went to Europe. And then from Europe, they traveled to other places. They came to the United States. They came to Canada. They went to the Mediterranean, other places in Eastern Europe. So these people fanned out all across the globe. And certainly Tedros at that time certainly would have known what was going on. And I mean, his failure on the EU side of things, he failed so badly. He, along with the technocrats at the EU, that they left the EU countries to fend for themselves. I mean, they had to come up with their own plans. And by the time they did, waiting for the EU to come up with a plan, which they never did and still haven't, waiting for Tedros to come out and give some guidance, which he never really has, way, way, way late to the game. I mean, I don't know why anybody pays any attention to these people anyway, but yes, we should absolutely cut off funding to the WHO, the World Health Organization, and every other globalist organization. We shouldn't be a part of any of it. And I do think Trump will get there. Just give him time. Now, Fire Fauci is trending on Twitter. As you know, a couple of days ago, and I know a lot of you feel the same way, I have been smelling a rat with this guy now for about 2 weeks. There's something bad wrong about this guy. And then a couple days ago, we get this photo that shows Fauci in a photo with about 15 of the top tier of the so-called globalist elite. I mean, you're talking about the top tier of the globalist elite. And, he's running in too many of these types of circles for me. Not only that, the more you watch this guy, the more it looks like he wants this to continue as long as he as it possibly can. It's almost like he wants this to be drug out. It's almost like he doesn't want things to return to normal anytime soon. Um, and you almost get the feeling that he's involved in some sort of a plot. Because the longer this goes on, the more damage it does to the economy, and therefore the more damage it's going to do to Trump in his reelection. And it just seems like the more Trump and some people in his administration talk optimistically about getting the country back to work, Fauci will then come up to the microphone and give all the reasons why he thinks that we should continue in this sort of semi-lockdown almost indefinitely. Some of the numbers he throws out there, and then he tells us, oh, well, gee, we've been relying on these models. Now we find out the models are not correct. There's just been too many problems with Fauci, and I definitely smell a rat with this guy. And it was just a gut instinct a couple of days ago. Now there's some reasonably good supporting evidence that this guy is connected to a lot of very top-tier so-called ruling elite types, and we know how they feel about the president. And I'm wondering whose interest that he's serving. Now, I don't think it's anything like what some people may suggest. Oh, he just likes the camera time. He likes the fact that he's getting front and center at these press conferences every day. He's loving the attention he's getting, and he doesn't want that to stop. Well, yeah, I mean, there may be some of that going on, but I think it's something much more sinister. Now, what is really driving this fire Fauci thing on Twitter, and the reason it's trending, is because of an unusual situation that happened yesterday during the press conference, or at the end of the press conference, honestly. So Trump gets into a bit of a spat with this ABC reporter, so-called reporter, fake news reporter, Jonathan Karl, who asked Trump a stupid question, another setup question, and Trump wasn't having any of it. And he shut Jonathan Karl down, told him he was a third-rate reporter and all that type of thing. So Trump didn't put up with any bullshit from Karl. Now, once the press conference ends and they all go to walk off stage, Fauci purposely lets people go ahead of him to walk off stage so that he is the last one to walk off stage. Then just as he's about to walk off stage, he turns and looks to Jonathan Karl, who seems to give Fauci like a thumbs up sign, and then Fauci looks back at him and acknowledges that by giving his own sort of signal, his own sort of thumbs up or recognition of the thumbs up, almost as if they had some sort of a deal going there. And I hope Trump gets a look at that. I'm sure he will, because he's looks at Twitter a lot. There's something very peculiar about that. And I've had enough of Fauci at this point. Dr. Birx, I have some issues with her as well, but it's Fauci is the one that I'm pretty much done with his act. Some people saying fire Fauci. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the guy's been around for he's served 5 or 6 presidents. He's a fixture within the bureaucracy. I don't know that we really need to fire him. I don't know. I could care less. But I would stop listening to him as far as he can give his medical opinion. He can give his opinion on the virus or what have you. But that's just one of the many issues Trump has to consider about how to handle the situation. Certainly you're going to get his input, but at some point there's a lot of other factors that need to be considered. And the damage that's being done to the economy compared to the amount of numbers that we're seeing from these failed models, I think that we have to be getting very, very close to the point where Trump is ready to get the country back to work. And there are certain hotspot areas that probably need to be under some sort of quarantine or some sort of restrictions for a little while longer, maybe another week or two, until we start to see that situation under control, because we don't want it spreading beyond that. But there are large areas across this country where the problem is completely manageable. There are 8 states right now of the 50 that don't even have any sort of lockdown orders or any restrictions at all. They just have advice that they're giving advising people to keep distance, advising people to do this or do that, not to go to large gatherings, but they haven't actually issued large lockdowns or anything like that. So, yeah, I think I have seen enough of Dr. Fauci and his act. I am done with him personally. I don't really need to see any more of what he's got to say. None of the things he said really panned out. I think everyone that I talk to and that I'm around, they're ready to, get back to life as normal. So I just think I'm done with it. I think a lot of people are done with it. I think it's time to get back to work, get the country back to work. And I'd say by the end of this week, we're already seeing some indications that the numbers are flattening out in New York, California, Washington, some of the hardest hit areas. There's still a few other hot spots. I think maybe focus on them a little bit, but I think for the most part, it's time to get the country back to business again. And I do suspect now that there is a certain element of deep staters who have an interest in keeping this thing going as long as they can, to damage Trump as much as they can, and the country, quite honestly. I just don't trust these people. And it's my gut instinct that there's something here that stinks. So that's my thoughts on it. I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but I'm ready to put this thing to bed. Maybe another week, but I think it's time to get back to work. With the exception of a few of these hot spots, we need to probably watch those a little closer. But the rest of the country, it's time to get back to work. That's my thoughts. Now, I want to follow up on a story we talked about last week, which is a really important story. And of course, following Huckleberry Horowitz, the Inspector General Huckleberry Horowitz, following his report on those random 29 FISAs that they looked at, found all 100% of them to be full of errors, you might say, and problems. As you know, the FISA court, Judge Boasberg, a couple days after that, advised the FBI and the DOJ that of those 29 cases, they want the names. They want the names. And now we learned that the FISA court wants the names by June 15th. That's an important date, meaning they want them sooner than later. What is the FISA court judge looking at here? Well, he's looking exactly at what I said he's looking at. And probably Attorney General Barr as well. And I don't know if Durham has any input in this. Probably not. But I'm sure he certainly talks to Barr. What they want to know is these 29 FISAs. We know they were on American citizens. And what we want to know is who were these American citizens. I mean, were these guys suspected terrorists? I think Attorney General Barr and many other people are looking at this are starting to think, yeah, I bet we're going to find out that those 29 Americans that had those faulty FISAs on them were not any way, shape, or form terrorists or suspected of being terrorists. I think it's a very good chance that these were all political enemies or adversaries of the Obama administration, possibly journalists, possibly people in the Trump campaign. Who knows? But my guess is we're going to find out that these were not terrorists or suspected terrorists. I think we're going to find out that these were political people. And if that is true, that is bombshell. That is absolutely bombshell. And I think that that is what the judge here is looking at. And the date is very interesting. As we know, Durham is hell-bent on staying on track on his investigation. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. And we know that he wants to have this thing wrapped up by summer. And we know why. He doesn't want to come out, finish his investigation, and start doing whatever it is he's going to do during the general election. I think he wants to, at least ways, complete his investigation to the extent that he wants to say, okay, I've finished my investigation. Here is what we have found happened. And then, of course, the indictments and charges and all the things that will occur after that, that will go on for a couple of years through all the legal proceedings and all the things that will happen after that. But I think he wants to get the nuts and bolts of what happened. He wants to tell the story before we get into the general election, because it could affect things going on with the election, because it was political. There's a political element to what he's going to tell us, and he doesn't want to look like, nor does Attorney General Barr or Trump, they do not want to look like that they're using the Durham investigation to, influence the election. They don't want to have that slander thrown at them, because it will take away from the credibility of the case, of the investigation. Durham doesn't want his investigation questioned. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want to be accused of being some sort of a political operative for Barr and Trump by dropping this thing during the election, general election, when in fact he's going to be pointing the finger at a lot of people working on behalf of the Democrats and some Democrats themselves who are also involved in this with the DNC, the Right Reverend Clinton, her campaign, Chalupa, and the whole nine yards. So they know there's a political element to this, and they don't want it getting mixed into the general election. So I think that's why there's such a full court press with Barr and Durham to have this wrapped up before the general election begins, which is going to be somewhere around the end of July, the beginning of August. Hard to say now because the conventions are being moved. The Democrat convention has been moved. The Republicans, I think, is a little later. But right around August, we're going to see the general election heat up, and I think that they want to have this story, this investigation, as far as what happened, they want to have it wrapped up by then. So I think that that's what's driving this urgency, this sense of urgency by Barr and Durham, for Durham to be wrapped up by the summer. And that may also play into why Judge Boasberg wants the names of these people by June the 15th, because it may end up playing into Durham's investigation. Because if Durham's investigation is to show that what was done to Carter Page and other members of the Trump campaign was a political operation and not a real legitimate investigation into Russian interference in the election or what have you, it certainly would help his investigation if, in addition to everything that he's turned up, that he can also show the 29 individuals, additional individuals, discovered by Horowitz's investigation that were targeted as well. And if it turns out that these were political people, political opponents of the Obama administration, especially if they were Republicans, journalists, people on Trump's campaign, that's going to provide a tremendous amount of support to the argument that Durham is going to have to make, that it's political. So Boasberg may be in contact with Barr. I would think that they probably are in some contact. So maybe Barr has encouraged Boasberg to whatever he's going to do to get to the bottom of it before the Democratic Party convention, the Democrats' convention, because after the Democrats' convention, that pretty much begins the kickoff of the general election campaign. So this timing would put him about a month before the Democrat convention, which would give the DOJ and Durham time to get this information about who these 29 individuals were, and that would certainly be a huge factor in Durham's investigation. Now, they may already know. For all we know, Barr and Durham have already looked at it. Maybe we don't know. Maybe they already know. So I don't know that. I'm just thinking out loud. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. That's very, very important. And that's going to be bombshell information, by the way, if it turns out that these 29 people that had the faulty physis on them were not suspected terrorists or anything like that, but were simply political enemies or opponents of the Obama administration. Now, I want to go into a story here from the Eurasia Review, and they are reporting in the Eurasia Review that John Durham has left his office in Connecticut. And we know that we've heard that Barr asked him to come to D.C. That's one story. There's another story that Durham wanted to come here because he wanted to make sure that the investigation didn't slow down because of coronavirus. But now it looks like there's something else going on, and it could be one or two or both of those things. But now it looks like Durham came here for a specific purpose, and he didn't just come here to give people a quick kick in the ass or to look at a couple of documents. And in fact, he hasn't left. Durham was concerned that coronavirus would keep him from being able to travel here. So he literally, and he was worried about, not being able to get a flight into D.C. from Connecticut. So he literally drove down here, drove from Connecticut to D.C. in his own personal vehicle, and he is still in D.C., and he is not leaving D.C. Normally he comes down, has a couple meetings, and goes back. He has not gone back. He came down here about 2 weeks ago in his own POV, and he is here in D.C. I'm not in D.C., I'm in Ohio, but he is in D.C. And he has not left, and it appears he's not leaving anytime soon. He's not leaving anytime soon because he's getting ready to do some things, according to the Eurasia Review. One of those things, he's getting ready to interview John Brennan. He has finally closed the loop, I guess, and he's getting ready to make his move on Brennan. That's what's being reported here at the Eurasia Review. So he has apparently set up a new, now he already had an existing office of people here, but he's now set up a new mini shop in D.C. He is here. He is in D.C. He's not gone back to Connecticut. He's not going back to Connecticut anytime soon. He's going to be sticking around for a little while, and it apparently is because he's getting ready to dial in on some people. One of them, it appears, is John Brennan that he's going to be interviewing. It looks like he has locked in on Brennan, and also this interagency task force, which I'd been talking about for 2 years, which I refer to as the 6-agency task force. Some people refer to it as the multi-agency task force, but this is this task force that Brennan put together, which brought together 5 or 6 different departments of the government, people from each one, all a bunch of deep staters, for this coordination between them all. So Durham has dialed in on Brennan, his interagency task force, and also how it coordinated with the ODNI's National Intelligence Council. This is something we just learned about a few days ago, and of course we find out this National Intelligence Council had a key role in creating the ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment, which is of course what set the stage for appointing Uncle Bob the Executioner, continuing to get the FISA renewals on Carter Page, and providing the, I guess, reason or the cause for all the investigations that went on with Manafort, with Papadopoulos, and all the rest. So this was a key document that led to everything that happened after January of 2017. And so this is basically what Durham has dialed in on. And they already had received all the emails, schedules, and all these things from Brennan. They apparently have done the deep dive on Brennan, and now Durham is ready to sit down and have a chit-chat with John Brennan. And that's why he's in town, and he doesn't plan on leaving anytime soon. So it looks like he's taken up a more permanent office here in D.C., even though he still has his responsibilities back in Connecticut as the top U.S. attorney there. He's now come to D.C., he's sticking around, he's set up a new shop, and he's getting ready to drill down on some people, and things are about to pick up, I guess you might say. We also have a Papadopoulos tweet from George Papadopoulos, where he is tweeting out just a couple of days ago that Downer, Alexander Down the Hatch Downer, has flipped on Brennan. Downer has flipped on Brennan. That's what Pops is saying. We're also getting another story that that the focus has been on Brennan for quite some time, and that Durham wanted to have an airtight case against Brennan so he could not wiggle off the hook, and a lot of people suggesting he now has that, which is why he is prepared to interview Brennan at this point. And he's also apparently begun to reevaluate Brennan's association with Christopher Steele and the dossier, and that would explain why in the last week or so we heard that Brennan has contacted Christopher Steele and also Sir Andrew Wood. He wanted to have another conversation with them, or have a conversation with them. They've already interviewed with the IG, but they never interviewed with Durham. So it looks like things are heating up in the Spygate scandal. It looks like John Brennan is now pretty close to probably having to answer some questions. Durham has dialed in on him, and it looks like things are getting ready to move in some direction. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, I remain confident that Durham is going to tell us what happened. I do believe that he is going to charge people with crimes. Let me give you the reasons why. First of all, it's not 100% Barr and Durham. It's Trump. I get the feeling, I'm pretty confident, that Trump is not going to let the deep state coup plotters get away with it. Even if Barr and Durham wanted to give them a pass, I don't think Trump's going to let them off the hook. Trump has said he would get involved if he had to. And I believe he will if he needs to. So that's one reason. I'm not putting my faith totally in Barr and Durham. I'm putting my faith in Trump. Trump's the one who said, I'm not going to let the coup plotters get away with it. And I believe him. But in the case of Barr, we do know that as soon as Barr came in, he shut down the Mueller witch hunt. He shut it down, and then he also shut down this attempt. Of course, they had the second part of the Mueller report, which was this obstruction thing that they were going to pass over to the Congress so they could use it to impeach. And of course, we know that Barr came out and pretty much shot that down and said, okay, well, he's leaving it up to us whether or not there was obstruction. No, there wasn't. So Barr did come in and shut it down, and he did appoint Durham. If Barr wanted to run a cover-up operation, you wouldn't appoint a guy like John Durham. Now, I don't have that much time left, but for those of you who've been watching my videos for several months know that I did a deep dive on John Durham a long time ago. This dude is legit. I mean, he is legit. He, remember, he's a Republican, and in Connecticut, he sent the governor to jail for 10 years for corruption. A Republican governor. So here's a Republican prosecutor, Durham, sending the Republican governor to jail for 10 years for corruption. If you Google John Durham every day, you'll see he sends people to jail every day. So this guy's not afraid to indict people. He's indicted a lot of mobsters. He's indicted a lot of corrupt politicians. We also know from a speech that he gave years ago to a group of graduating law students, he spent the entire speech focused on the most important thing, focusing on why it's so important to keep the system clean of corrupt public officials. The thing that pisses John Durham off more than anything in this world, according to people that know him, is corrupt FBI and DOJ officials, and even more so, intelligence people. He's very, very leery and skeptical of intelligence people. So, you know, we also know that after Horowitz came out and said that he thought that the Operation Crossfire was properly predicated, both Durham and Barr came out immediately and said they disagree, that they don't believe it was properly predicated. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means, well, it wasn't properly predicated, meaning it was illegal. And Durham then comes out and announces, well, the DOJ came out, their spokesperson came out and announced that his investigation had now is now a criminal investigation. Well, if he had not found crimes, he would not have moved into a criminal investigation. And if you look at what he is looking at compared to Uncle Bob the Executioner, it looks like he's doing a serious, real investigation. He's talking to all the people that I would talk to. He's following the same trail I would follow if I were trying to track down the truth. He's put together this large staff. He's traveled all over Europe. He spent the entire summer of last year traveling to Australia and the UK and just all over Europe. Italy, been there twice with Barr, put a lot of pressure on a lot of people. Every indication I have tells me that Durham is the real deal and that this is not a guy who would waste his time. He's a serious individual. And he's a prosecutor. He wants scalps. When you appoint a prosecutor, they want scalps. I doubt that he's going to spend all this time, all this money to get to the end of it and say, well, I really didn't find anything. I don't think so. I think we're going to get the real deal here. So stick around, keep the faith, and I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See ya. Bye.